So first up, let's talk about how we get Istio up and running fast and keep it running. When it comes to speed and efficiency of running a service mesh, the most fundamental need is also probably the most common pain point. Most enterprises are running multiple platforms, EKS, AKS, OpenShift. So often teams find themselves managing many different versions of Kubernetes or Istio with disparate upgrade cycles. And being able to manage this complex footprint becomes problematic over time. The overhead of tracking compatibility between different Istio and Kubernetes versions is really hard. And then upgrading itself is also very difficult in a multi-cluster scenario. So teams take on the burden of upgrading different Istio versions over time separately, each with its own complexities. And ultimately, these teams kind of fall behind on upgrades, miss critical vulnerability patches and new features. So in this release, Tetrate addressed challenges in deploying and running services in these complex environments in 3 ways. So most importantly, we're reducing the complexity of running multiple Istio versions and ensure compatibility with Kubernetes. So Tetrate Service Bridge tracks Istio and Kubernetes version compatibility, allows you to maintain different Istio versions across different clusters so your teams can upgrade at their own pace. Additionally, we are proud to say that Tetrate has achieved official Red Hat OpenShift partner status. So what this means is that every Tetrate Service Bridge release is rigorously tested on OpenShift in close collaboration with Red Hat engineering. So for people who are just starting with Istio and Service Mesh, we have something for you too. So we're making it even easier to get started on AWS with our hardened, performant, and fully upstream open source Istio distribution. It's called Tetrate Istio distro. You can get it working on AWS with pretty much one command through a native EKS add-on integration, further lowering the barrier to experiment with your first service mesh. So next up, let's welcome Adam to provide an overview of Tetrate Service Bridge and introduce the first demo scenario. Take it away, Adam.
Thanks, David. So let's consider the scenario that's probably the first thing a platform operator does after they've stood up their platform, Kubernetes, and layered in a service mesh, and that's onboarding an app team. So imagine Amy, who's a app owner responsible for a team, comes to Jamil, our platform operator, and wants to onboard their services. They want to take advantage of the benefits of their mesh-based platform. Well, Jamil, our platform operator, is going to have to link Amy and her team's identity to a specific portion, a specific corner of their platform. Give them the right visibility, give them the right rights to author some configuration, but maybe limit the scope of what they can do, and also set sensible defaults with them for them. So ultimately, they want to give Amy and her team a seamless onboarding experience so they can start to work with their service self-service without more platform team interjection. So let's see how TSB, Tetrate Service Bridge, makes that really easy. So I'm going to log into TSB. This is linked to Azure Active Directory. And first, I'm going to log in wearing the hat of Jamil, who, as you just saw, is our platform operator. He's received the request to onboard Amy and her team. As I log in as Jamil, you'll notice I have admin rights. I can see everything within the platform. I can see all tenants. So a tenant is typically linked to a line of business, a large portfolio of applications. This then is subdivided into workspaces. So we're going to focus throughout this demo on our customer experience tenant. We'll notice that right now we have 2 workspaces for our ticketing application, the dev and the prod environment. We want to add a next one for our customer 360 application, which is what Amy owns. So I'm going to onboard a workspace. The name of the application is Customer 360, so we'll call this Customer 360 Prod. We'll give it the name of Customer 360 Prod environment. We'll copy that into the description. Now we can give it a hint of where these services are going to run in the Kubernetes-based platform, which is GKE East in our Customer 360 namespace. We also could provide wildcards in any of these selectors, basically saying any cluster that has this namespace, suck this into this workspace. For this demo, we're just going to explicitly say GKE East in this namespace. And lastly, we'll give it an isolation boundary. This is the mechanism, as David mentioned, running multiple Istio versions in an environment. This ties us, for isolation purposes, to a specific Istio control plane. So our Customer 360 application is going to be linked to one specific control plane in all services within the workspace. So I create that. Now the last thing I need to do as a platform operator is assign the rights to Amy and her team. So these groups are derived from actual groups in Azure AD. They're part of the Customer 360 application, so I'm going to make them workspace developers. And all this is doing is setting what they can do, what they can see, their access rights to the platform. Now that we have that established, I can log out as Jamil. I'm going to now put on the hat of Amy, the platform, or rather the application owner. So I'm going to go back through this login through Azure AD. This time I'm going to select Amy's account. When she logs in, you'll need to immediately see I have now a contextualized view for this application owner. I just see the customer experience tenant because that's a line of business I'm part of. And I only see my one workspace. I don't see the other ticketing workspaces that were underneath that. I can look at the details of this workspace and immediately notice that my services were pulled into the platform because I gave it the hint of where they're running. We're able to see metrics. We see the topology view, the dependency graph of our services. We notice one of our services is colored red here, so we could drill in, get even more information about why that might be misbehaving, comparing versions of our application, cross latency or potentially error rates, things such as that. And in my terminal on the right, I am logged into Kubernetes. And if I execute a command to get some of the Istio objects in my namespace, you'll notice that a minute and a half ago, so 91 seconds ago, some sensible defaults were delivered to this namespace. And this corresponded exactly to when Jamil onboarded the workspace. So sensible defaults, like we are going to enforce strict MTLS authentication, some sensible defaults of our own timeouts and retries, so we have some baseline level of resiliency for application. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we give specific rights to the app owners, and we might want to constrain what they could override or change. For instance, in this environment, we have it set such that app owners are not able to loosen or relax the security policy. So as Amy, the app owner, if I were to go into this and make an attempt to set our MTLS as optional rather than strict with it, which is the default, I'm going to get an error, which is basically telling me you're not able to loosen the security settings. So as I author further settings, I must at least maintain the traffic mode or the MTLS as required. And so now I can apply these changes. Lastly, I'll point out that everything that takes place within the platform is audited and logged. So for instance, we see 3 minutes ago, the Customer 360 workspace was created by this ID. This ties to Jamil's Azure GUID for his user. We see then that he assigned workspace dev rights to a specific team. And then we see a couple of logs related to just this demo we're doing with creating the default workspace, and then when that configuration was distributed out to the system. So in summary, what did we just accomplish? Well, Jamil was able to use the multi-tenancy constructs within TSB to carve off the portion of the platform for Amy and her team, the Customer 360 application, link that to their identity within Azure AD. Amy and her team can then automatically begin to work with their application. It was automatically discovered, sucked in. We saw they had some sensible defaults, and then her team was able to start to view metrics, observability data, and information about their application. Further, they could then begin configuring their service self-service.